At precisely 14:07 hours local time on June 27, 2025, the calm of the Persian Gulf shattered. The USS Harry S. Truman, the pride of the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet, had been operating in international waters, its flight deck alive with the roar of FA-18 Super Hornets preparing for routine operations. But what was supposed to be just another day in the Gulf quickly spiraled into a confrontation that would shock the world. Over the horizon, Iranian fighter jets, twin-tailed and unmistakable even on grainy radar scopes, closed in. Their intent would soon become terrifyingly clear: to directly engage the Truman, marking the most brazen escalation in U.S.-Iran tensions in decades. It all began hours earlier when U.S. surveillance drones detected unusual activity at an Iranian airbase near Bandar Abbas. Satellite imagery captured IRIF F-14 Tomcats being armed not with typical defensive payloads, but with long-range anti-ship missiles, Nor and Kader variants capable of striking targets over 100 miles away. The significance was not lost on the analysts at CENTCOM. A scramble order was transmitted to the Truman's Combat Information Center. Within minutes, radar operators, weapons officers, and the ship's captain were on high alert. The Truman's protective screen, composed of Ticonderoga-class cruisers and Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, adjusted positions to form a tighter Aegis defense perimeter. But even the most advanced naval technology couldn't fully prepare the crew for what was about to unfold. By 1358, the Iranian jets had crossed into international airspace, maintaining a low altitude of barely 500 feet to stay beneath radar horizons as long as possible. But the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye early warning aircraft circling high above spotted them, feeding data back to the Truman CIC in real time. Combat Air Patrol FA-18s were vectored toward the incoming threat, their pilots scanning the empty blue sky for visual confirmation. The tension aboard the Truman was palpable. Every sailor knew the significance of Iranian fighter jets approaching a U.S. aircraft carrier. It wasn't just a provocation, it was a challenge. Then came the chilling moment at 14:07. Without warning, 2 Iranian F-14 Tomcats broke formation, climbing sharply and launching their payloads. Streams of smoke erupted from their hardpoints as Nor anti-ship missiles leapt into the sky, arcing toward the Truman's battle group. The missiles, traveling at near supersonic speeds, closed the distance in seconds. On the Truman's bridge, alarms screamed. The words "Vampire inbound," Navy jargon for incoming missile, echoed over the 1MC ship-wide announcement system. Sailors rushed to battle stations. Bulkhead doors slammed shut, securing compartments. The carrier's phalanx CIWS guns spun up, their distinctive whir audible even over the ship's general quarters alarm. The USS Normandy, a cruiser positioned off Truman's port bow, was first to engage. Its SPY-1 radar tracked the incoming missiles, and the ship's Aegis combat system automatically selected Standard Missile-2 interceptors. With a deafening roar, vertical launch cells spat SM-2s skyward, their solid fuel motors leaving trails of fire. The SM-2s arced toward the threat, guided by radar uplinks, their proximity fuses set to detonate near the incoming missiles. At the same time, the Truman's own electronic warfare suite came alive. SLQ-32 jammers emitted high-power signals, attempting to confuse the guidance systems of the Nor missiles. Decoy chaff rounds fired from launchers on the carrier's sponsons blossomed into glittering clouds of radar-reflective material, creating false targets. Above the chaos, U.S. Navy FA-18 Super Hornets engaged the Iranian jets. The Hornet pilots locked on with AM-120 AMRAAMs and let fly, the missiles streaking toward their targets at Mach 4. Iranian pilots attempted evasive maneuvers, dumping flares and chaff, but the AMRAAMs were relentless. One F-14 disappeared in a fireball, debris scattering across the sea. The second jet took a hit to its tail, spiraling downwards before its pilot ejected. Meanwhile, the first wave of Iranian missiles met their fate. SM-2s detonated close enough to rip their fragile guidance sections apart, sending both Nors tumbling harmlessly into the sea. A near disaster had been averted, but only just. As the smoke cleared, the enormity of what had just transpired set in. The attack on the USS Truman wasn't a miscalculation or a rogue commander's folly. It was a deliberate strike by the Islamic Republic's Air Force, a direct assault on one of America's most valuable military assets. And the U.S. reaction when it came would indeed shock the world. Within minutes, orders came down from the highest levels of the Pentagon. CENTCOM activated Operation Resolute Thunder, a pre-planned retaliatory strike designed for just this scenario. The goal? Neutralize Iran's coastal air bases, missile batteries, and naval assets capable of threatening U.S. forces in the Gulf. The USS Truman's flight deck became a hive of activity. Ordnance crews armed Super Hornets with a mix of AGM-88 HARM anti-radiation missiles, AGM-84 Harpoons, and laser-guided JDAMs. Below deck, Tomahawk cruise missile launch orders were transmitted to the destroyers and cruisers guarding the Truman. At precisely 1512, the first Tomahawks launched from their vertical tubes, their rocket boosters propelling them skyward before the turbojets kicked in and they skimmed the sea surface toward Iranian targets. Satellite feeds showed the missiles fanning out, each assigned a specific radar site, command bunker, or missile launcher. The Persian Gulf lit up as explosions rippled along Iran's southern coastline. U.S. Air Force B-1B Lancer bombers, already on station over Qatar, received their own orders. Refueled mid-air by KC-135 Stratotankers, they roared toward Iranian airspace, staying just outside territorial limits while unleashing long-range precision munitions. Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missiles, JASSMs, streaked toward their targets, hitting hangars, ammo dumps, and hardened shelters at Bandar Abbas and Bushehr. Iranian air defenses responded in chaos, SAM batteries firing blindly, unable to distinguish decoys from actual threats amid the electronic warfare onslaught. Throughout the night, the retaliatory strikes continued. F-35s operating from Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE joined the fight, using their stealth capabilities to penetrate Iranian airspace and deliver pinpoint strikes on radar installations and command centers. The U.S. had no intention of occupying territory, but the message was unmistakable. Any attack on American forces would be met with overwhelming force. By dawn, satellite images showed Iranian airfields in ruins, dozens of aircraft destroyed on the ground, and key missile launch sites reduced to smoldering craters. What stunned the international community wasn't just the scale of the U.S. response, but the speed and precision with which it was executed. Diplomats scrambled to contain the fallout. The UN Security Council convened an emergency session. Iran's leadership condemned what they called American aggression, but found themselves on the defensive in global public opinion. Analysts on every major news network dissected the engagement, from CNN to Al Jazeera to BBC, marveling at the Truman's survival and the sophisticated coordination of U.S. forces. Military experts highlighted the role of Aegis missile defense, the Phalanx CIWS system, and the seamless integration of air and naval power. The attack also ignited fierce debate within Iran. Leaked communications suggested that elements within the Revolutionary Guard had pushed for the strike, hoping to provoke a limited clash that would rally domestic support. Instead, they watched as their prized military assets were destroyed, their coastal defense grid shattered, and their air power diminished, all within a matter of hours. Iranian media broadcast images of burned-out hangars and wrecked missile trucks, trying to frame them as symbols of martyrdom rather than defeat. For the sailors aboard the USS Truman, the day's events were a sobering reminder of the dangers they faced in the Gulf. The crew had trained for years for such a scenario, but few had believed it would actually come to pass. In the hours after the attack, as damage control teams inspected every inch of the carrier for signs of secondary damage, the sense of relief was palpable. The Truman had weathered the storm. The carrier strike group remained intact. And the United States had demonstrated once again the reach and power of its military when called upon to defend its forces. But the implications of that day would echo far beyond the waters of the Persian Gulf. Global markets reacted instantly to the news, oil prices surging as tankers altered course and insurance rates for shipping through the Strait of Hormuz spiked. World leaders issued statements urging restraint. but also acknowledging the U.S. right to defend its assets in international waters. Even nations critical of American policy recognized that the attack on the Truman crossed a line few thought Iran would dare approach. Back in Washington, the president addressed the nation in a live broadcast, flanked by military leaders. His message was clear. The United States sought no war with Iran, but would not hesitate to protect its servicemen and women. He reaffirmed America's commitment to freedom of navigation in the world's critical waterways, declaring that the Truman and her escorts would remain on station as long as necessary to ensure stability. Meanwhile, additional carrier strike groups were ordered to move toward the region, reinforcing the U.S. posture and sending a message that any further aggression would be met with an even stronger response. In Tehran, the mood was grim. Iranian military planners scrambled to assess the damage, reassign surviving assets, and prepare for the possibility of a wider conflict. But they also faced internal questions. How had their most advanced air defenses been so easily neutralized? How had U.S. forces responded so rapidly and decisively? And most critically, what had they gained from attacking the Truman, other than international condemnation and the loss of critical military infrastructure? The attack and its aftermath became the subject of intense study in military academies around the world. Analysts pored over radar tracks, satellite images, and declassified communications to piece together the timeline of events. The engagement was hailed as a textbook case of integrated defense, the combination of air power, missile defense, electronic warfare, and naval coordination operating flawlessly under pressure. For America's allies, it was a reassurance of U.S. capabilities. For its adversaries, it was a warning. And so, as the USS Truman continued its patrols, her flight deck once again launching and recovering aircraft under the blazing Gulf sun, the sailors aboard knew they had lived through history. They had faced the unthinkable. A direct attack by Iranian fighter jets on a U.S. aircraft carrier, and emerged victorious. The world watched, stunned not only by the audacity of the assault, but by the speed, precision, and scale of the U.S. military's response. The message was clear. The seas would remain free, the U.S. Navy would stand its ground, and any who dared strike at America's mightiest ships would face consequences swift and severe.